Sonic Generations and Ace Attorney Investigations 2. Both of these games came out in 2013. Both of them got a re-release in 2024, and that's not even all the similarities between these two games. Both of them feature a rival character to a blue spiky-haired hero. Both of them start off as villains in their series, but they eventually become a lot friendlier, if still very serious and stoic. Both Shadow the Hedgehog and Edgeworth are characters with a lot of trauma, but that's also what makes them so great and what makes them ultimately huge fan favorites. And at the end of the day, both of these games are deep dives into these side characters in a way that you might not expect. Despite technically being over a decade old, both Shadow Generations and the Investigations collections are so good that they're easily my top spots for Game of the Year in 2024. They're certainly better than Astrobot, what the heck. I enjoy them so much, but I can't quite decide which one I like more. So hopefully in comparing these two games, I can come to an appropriate conclusion. And by the way, I'm going to be very careful with spoilers, especially with the Ace Attorney games, but do be careful just in case. The original Generations game was a love letter to the entire Sonic franchise. It was a celebration of the past while also incorporating things that were modern. That's what makes Shadow such a great fit for this style of gameplay. He's a fan favorite character, but his origin is kind of complex, and he hasn't really had a time to shine in the limelight for quite some time. Personally, I love that we're finally doing something with Shadow's alien DNA and using it in a really meaningful way. I've kind of felt like Sega and Sonic Team have been really embarrassed about their mid-2000s games and just don't really want to talk about it or any of the lore implications. I'm glad they really are, because holy cow, the wait has been worth it. Think of this. The original Sonic Generations was a pristine masterpiece full of great gameplay. So good, in fact, that IGN actually likes it. Take that and multiply it by 10 with all of these Doom powers. You're flying around, warping, stopping time. The fluidity and movement that Shadow gives you feels so different than Sonic, but it's a natural evolution on an already amazing formula. Then you get the nods to the past with all of these levels from Shadow's past that you get with an amazing storyline that doesn't overstay its welcome. In fact, I know many people are probably upset about the 5-hour campaign, but that's way more than I thought it would, and it was the perfect length of time for Sonic Team to just give this game all the polish it needed and really knock it out of the park. I know Sonic Frontiers was more divisive as a game, and it's not to say that you shouldn't be ambitious, because I love the direction that game ultimately ended up taking, but in this case, you can tell that Sonic Team locked in for this project, and it shows. And heck, the 5-hour campaign is only the Shadow side. You still have the original Sonic Generations gameplay that is amazing and has additional features like finding Chow in the levels. I will say, as a small critique, going back to Sonic feels way more limited and a lot more boring, which is a crazy thing to say about Sonic freaking Generations. Well, actually, that's not my only complaint. I'm going to give you some really petty grievances right now. For example, I thought it was weird that Shadow of 5, the game, didn't get any level representation whatsoever. I mean, I guess you could say that it has a larger part in the story in general with Black Doom and the Black Arms, and maybe you could make a case that the Doom's Eye segments are a Shadow of 5 reference, but the music playing is Radical Highways, so I don't know, I guess Sonic Adventure 2 just gets 2 levels? I guess that's not the end of the world. The bosses are extremely cool, no doubt about it. BioLizard is perhaps the most iconic Shadow fight, other than his own fight with Sonic, which also doesn't get a boss fight for some reason. Then you've got Metal Overlord, which is kind of a deep cut, and extremely cool to see the Shadow and Metal Sonic relationship go down. Then there's Mephiles?
Seal of some sort?
Mephiles! Which is insane. Mephiles is basically not even canon anymore, and I love that he references that with such desperation. In Sonic 06, he was without a doubt the most menacing character by far, but in this, he's just this sniveling little weakling. I absolutely love the difference there, and Shadow gets such amazing lines against him. That being said, it's really weird that Infinite was not a boss fight in this game, especially considering that Infinite's whole backstory is Shadow bullying him and how much he hates him, so I don't know. A really strange missed opportunity there. Then there's Emerald, which, holy cow, when he got teased in the animated trailers, I freaked out, but man, we didn't get any actual interactions with him in the game itself. I mean, I guess I'm happy to get any Sonic Battle GBA love whatsoever. That game is so underrated, but man, another missed opportunity. One final odd thing is the way they handle the Sonic 3 movie DLC. If you don't know, you can spend about $6 to get Tokyo from the movie as a playable level in the game. You also play as Shadow with his character model from the movie, and you also have Keanu Reeves voicing it.
Looks like how Maria described the Earth.
which is like fine and dandy and all, but it feels really jarring if I'm being honest, especially because Keanu Reeves is just clearly not that invested in delivering exciting emotional lines. You also get these little time attack things that are fun and cool and all, but I don't know, as a level I feel like it's kind of lacking. I'm glad that it's DLC, I suppose, but also considering the game only came out like a month or two before it, I feel like they probably could have just bundled it together. I don't know. I'm hit or miss on this one personally, but something worth talking about. But look, at the end of the day, this game punched way above its weight class. It was honestly very emotional. I felt like crying at the end of the actual story that went down. And I have to say that Dr. Gerald Robotnik's diary is the single smartest and coolest pre-order item the world has ever known. Holy cow, this is chock full of lore-accurate information lifted directly from the games with so many breadcrumbs for future games to come. It is phenomenal seeing all this finally come to life. I was really concerned that Sonic Team was just writing them out with all these casual comments by Eggman after Sonic Forces, but I really hope they're still relevant. I love the concept of Gun. I love all these hidden characters who are digging deep and expanding the world of Sonic in a really interesting way. Kudos to Ian Flynn for doing such an amazing job, and I'm so excited to see what lies in the future. I loved all the references and love that Shadow got throughout the entire series. If anything, I'm sad that they basically wrote out the Doom powers. I love that Shadow finally feels distinct compared to Sonic, but at the same time, they also wrote in the opportunity for him to get it back. In fact, even Black Doom as a character is hinted at within the game itself as potentially having the power to come back. I really hope that he does, because we need more villains. I love Dr. Eggman, don't get me wrong, and he can be sinister when he really puts his mind to it, but most of the time he's just comedic relief, and we need more villains in general in the Sonic series. So if anything, I think that the Year of Shadow and this game show that Sega is putting a lot of love and effort into the lore of the series again. I love that Ian Flynn is behind it, and I kind of think that all the rumors of a Sonic Adventure 3 coming out are basically founded. On a completely different note,
objection!
We've got the Ace Attorney games. If you've never played them yourself, you have to take my word for it. It is so much fun being a lawyer. The best series I can compare it to is Yakuza, which is also very Japanese. It can be dramatically compelling and also absurdly silly at the same time with a colorful cast of characters. The Investigations Collection has two different games that were originally on the Nintendo DS, one of which is localized for the very first time, and that's what basically makes the game feel like a brand new long-lost addition to the series. You play the game as Miles Edgeworth, and he is a fan favorite character for a reason. I mean, think about it. Would you rather play as a beta male with a weeb for a sidekick, or a Giga Chad with an honorable ninja thief for a sidekick? Actually, Edgeworth is kind of a weeb himself. That's my favorite running joke throughout the entire game series, but that's neither here nor there. In the investigation games, you are at the crime scene, not the courthouse. You are digging up evidence, you are finding all sorts of inconsistencies, and then you are fighting different suspects using logic and wits. In fact, that's logic with a capital L, because that's essentially Edgeworth's superpower. He's very, very smart, and when you're using this mechanic in the game, it's kind of like a crafting system in that you are combining two different pieces of information to create something brand new. One subtle benefit of the logic system is that it never feels like the final revelation comes out of nowhere. There's a really classic scenario in most Ace Attorney games where you're backed up into a corner, you don't have any way out, but then by some miracle, some brand new piece of information comes to you, and that ends up being the turnabout that solves the case. In this game, you actually earn that, and you get to see the experience of Edgeworth piecing together different bits of logic. It doesn't feel like a Deus Ex Machina. It feels really earned, and it's super, super exciting. Then in the second game, you have an entire mechanic around dueling people mentally. They call it mind chess, but it ends up being something a lot more akin to a psychological warfare. I really like how Edgeworth has the read on people and their personalities, and it uses that to his advantage in different ways. I also love that doing nothing, waiting, and letting the person continue to spill the beans is a valid tactic. That is something that real-life investigators do. Oftentimes, silence is the best weapon. I love that Edgeworth employs that in different ways depending on the temperaments of the people he's up against. You'll notice I keep bringing up Investigations 2 because that is the star of the show. Yes, you also get Investigations 1, and that game's fine. It came out on the Nintendo DS for North America and other regions of the world. It's a side story. It's got some fun fan service. It plays in a slightly different way, but the developers of this series knew that they needed to knock the ball out of the park with a sequel, and they did that in so much more. This is a game that was long lost because it was only released in Japan, which is a really strange choice considering that future Ace Attorney games, yeah, they may not have sold very well, they were only released digitally, but we still ended up getting them. This one, for whatever reason, just nope, we got absolutely nothing. It ended up taking on this Mother 3 level of status, and that this was an amazing, phenomenal game that just didn't get an official localization. And so, just like Mother 3, a fan translation team took up the reins and did the work themselves. I know that there are a lot of people who are not as happy with the official names for a lot of these characters, but to that I have to say there's no way in heck that Capcom was ever going to acknowledge the fan games. In fact, Capcom actually acknowledging the fan game's existence means that they probably would have had to take it down, so it was ultimately a win for Ace Attorney games at the end of the day. I'm glad we eventually got there, even if it took 11 years, because holy cow, I did not play the fan translation game. I was always a firm believer that we would eventually get this game, and it paid off in spades. This game, ladies and gentlemen, is phenomenal. It's worth playing the first game just to get a satisfying conclusion to certain plot threads that were left alive. Even if you've never played an Ace Attorney game before it, I would highly recommend it. I really want to make a proper review on it, and I most likely will, because I'm not giving you any spoilers, and there's so much that I want to talk about. I'm just bursting with excitement because I feel like Ace Attorney has never been better, and it's literally an 11-year-old game. I should also note too that in this amazing Investigations collection, you get updated art. You could play with crunchy DS sprites if you really want, and I'm sure there's some people who do like that, but the updated HD art style is gorgeous. Capcom calls the art style chibi, but that is a disservice to how good this actually looks. I have never ever enjoyed chibi in freaking side stories like Persona Q or any of the Final Fantasy games, so this is a huge breath of fresh air. Not only that, but you get orchestrated remixes of amazing music in the games, and you can actually play them in the games itself. If you're going through a cross-examination, you can swap to the old DS style, or you can use the orchestrated versions, which in my opinion just sound much better. The Ace Attorney games are known for having amazing music, and orchestrated versions just fit the world so beautifully. At the end of the day, I think I have to give the nod to Sonic X Shadow Generations being the better game, only because it truly is new. There is actual new content that they made specifically for the year 2024, but do not sleep on Ace Attorney Investigations Collection. I'm promising you, even if you've never played an Ace Attorney game, it is so worth your time and more. These are two games with very meaty stories. They are going to last you a good amount of time, but never overstay their welcome. Well, actually, one case in the first game might overstay its welcome, but for the second game, holy cow, it is fluid and great and phenomenal. I cannot recommend it highly. All but to say, Scouts, these were my games of 2024, but what were yours? Were they either of these? Were they a retro indie that I'm totally glossing over? I would love to hear about it. And if you don't know, I am still recovering from the California fires that did burn down my house and most of my collection. If you're interested in keeping up with our stories, I've been making little vlogs here and there if you're curious about what I've been up to, so definitely consider checking those out. As always, stay safe, Scouts. Give your loved ones a big hug from me. They're the only things that matter in this world. Here's to an even better year for gaming, because 2024 was pretty sweet.